Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. And today we're going to be talking about The Accountant number 2. That's right. Yesterday I talked about The Accountant. Today we're talking about its sequel. And one day I will inevitably be talking about the third film in the franchise, and one that I'm actually really eager to watch. Because while The Accountant 2 was not, in my opinion, as good as The Accountant 1, it definitely expanded the world in ways that I enjoyed, but it also softened the world in ways that I didn't. And if you've ever wondered what would happen if autistic children went to, Xavier School, this movie is absolutely up your alley on that one in ways that make you suspend disbelief. Like, it pushes it to the absolute utter breaking point, and that's kind of one of the problems with this movie. But I don't want to lead off with what I found to be problematic, or just issues with overall. Let's just kind of talk about the film itself. So this came out 10 years after the release of the first. 9 years after the release of the first movie, and it was one that went to theaters. It had a higher budget, $80 million. The first one was $44 million. But didn't gross anywhere near as much. It did a worldwide take-home of $102 million, whereas the first movie had about $156 million take-home. But that was also pre-COVID, and 2016 box office was pretty good across the board in a number of ways. This movie, though, even though it had a higher budget, it felt smaller, and it didn't feel like it was shot the same. If I had to make a guess, the first movie was shot on film. This one, I think, it definitely was shot digital. And there were, it kind of suffered from what you would have in a sequel, where it tries to expand things, but it has issues with it. But let me just kind of talk about this, right? Because the story, it's good. It continues on all these years past the events of the first movie. Christian and Braxton have not seen each other since the events of the first movie, which kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand that Christian is going to kind of go back into what he's doing. Medina is now the head of FinCEN. She's the head of that part of the, Treasury Department. And Raymond King, has been, he's gone, right? He's retired, but he's now doing, he's now trying to find people, right? He's working as a private investigator, and he ends up trying to track down, this boy. He was hired by this woman and this boy and her husband. And he was hired by the woman's father I think in El Paso to do this. And then, of course, he's waiting for this meeting, and all of these like El Salvadorian special forces guys are like all outside waiting for him. And then, she's there, but she's like clearly dangerous. She's clearly someone not to be, trifled with. And in the process, he gets killed, she gets away, but he writes on his arm, "Find the accountant," which is what Medina finds, and then contacts Christian Wolff, even though she is very, very distrustful of his activities, how he gets information. Never mind the fact that she's still the head of FinCEN. Okay, she took over the job, and she still gets fed the information from Christian Wolff, which I thought was kind of funny too, is this whole idea of like, you are actively engaging in getting information from a person to be a criminal who works with bad people. Like, you do this, and yet you're still having like issues throughout the entire movie about the legality of what you're doing when you're completely working off the books. Right. And I had issue with that, because I understand it leads to like another plot point in the film. Like, it's set up to where she gets pissed off and she goes and tries to figure it out on her own, and then does in many ways figure it out on her own, which I think is a way for like the audience to get the idea that both of these stories converge at the same point. They did this beautifully, by the way, in the first 2 seasons, especially the first season of Stranger Things. In fact, all the seasons of Stranger Things largely do this. You have the 3 groups, right? I know I'm going off here, but hear me out. You've got the young kids, right? You've got the teenagers, and then you've got the adults. Those 3 groups of people in the first couple seasons of that show, all the seasons of that show, all their storylines converge at the same point. And the way that the show is written is that it feels like it's done relatively naturally, right? It doesn't feel forced. And this is one of those situations where they're trying to do the same thing. So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So she ends up calling, Christian Wolff. She finds him. She gets a hold of him by calling the, neuroscience center and like talking, to the receptionist in ways the receptionist doesn't understand, rather than just, I don't know, like calling the person directly. I don't know why at this point, like you haven't had a way to contact each other, but whatever. And then, they go and they start trying to look into this whole situation. And they realize that they need help because now we're dealing with like prostitution, human trafficking, sex trafficking, all of these things, something that quite frankly, Christian is not necessarily the most equipped for in regards of handling the nuances of these situations. So they call in Braxton, who is an assassin. All right. And, he is very much, like in a different place in his life. He likes what he does, but he kind of feels like he's a bit alone. He's trying to get a dog. There's this whole scene where he's like arguing with a woman about adopting a corgi, and he wants to get the corgi early so he can bond with the corgi. And she's like, that can't happen. He's getting pissed off about it. Trust me, it comes into play later on. That's what I'm saying. Like the script for this one was like a little all over the place. This was a scene of him walking around in his underwear, wielding a gun, yelling in a hotel room that's meant to be like, yeah, this is him expressing loneliness. He wants someone there. And that's why when his brother calls, he's pissed off, but he ends up showing up. And then they have a lot of moments about kind of like, why. Braxton, honestly, hard on his sleeve. And this is where Bernthal did a great job. He does this as Frank Castle as well. Great job with the whole concept of like, why wasn't I enough for you? Right? Like, why didn't you come find me? Why weren't you coming to see me? You said you were going to come see me. Like he wants his big brother to show up for him. And I totally relate to that. I've got 3 younger brothers. I don't have the best relationship with all of them due to age differences, but it's kind of like, I understand that. And so I enjoyed their chemistry. I enjoyed them working together. But of course, at one point he gets pissed off and he's going to leave. And then he gets called up because he's an assassin. And then he's told, oh, hey, you got to go kill Medina. And then Medina ends up getting attacked by the woman at the beginning of the movie, played by Danielle Pineda, and we find out, okay, so this is where, this is the thing. So Danielle Pineda was just a woman, okay? She was trying to get from, I believe, El Salvador to the United States with her husband and her son. They were captured. The husband was killed. The son was taken and put into like a foster care center, I think like outside of Waco or outside of Juarez. And she was then trafficked to be a prostitute in the States. She ends up at one point getting away. We don't quite know how. Then she ends up getting into a car accident, hurting her head. And at that point, it like rewired her brain. And so then she ends up becoming an assassin. I'm not even making this up, right? They explained it in the movie as like, someone who like, it activates something that wasn't there before, right? Like a person gets a head injury and then wakes up and they can speak fluent French or something, and they've never studied French before. It's this thing that happens, and that's largely what they're trying to say. And you're like, okay, fine. Okay, that's her villain origin story. Cool, I get it. Okay, but she had a kid, and that's the kid that, J.K. Simmons was looking for at the beginning of the movie. Like, okay, now it's all starting to come together. So then, right, like Medina is taken out, not killed, but injured. Christian and Braxton then travel to the compound down in Mexico to go and get the kids. And during this time, this is when it cuts back to the neuroscience center, where you have got the woman there that, the voice, right? She's working with a bunch of these other neurodivergent and autistic children that have now all become master hackers. And they challenge each other in ways. It's so weird, guys. It's so weird. Like I said, it's almost like it's like the X-Men school for the autistically gifted. And I love the idea of having positive portrayal of autistic people and neurodivergent people in movies. I think we need more of that. You will have to suspend your disbelief a great deal during these scenes, because this is where it goes from like more grounded, gritty realism from the first movie with a bit of a fantastical element to just straight up like, what world are we in right now? You know? And so as a result of that, it gets a little bit wonky, but they end up, going down to this compound. At the same time, the guy who runs the prostitution side of things here in the States, who had, Ray killed at the beginning of the movie, he has his assassin and tells that guy to go down and take out all the kids. And then that guy is going to leave, the country, right? Okay. Well, basically what happens is they go down there and they take everybody out. And at the time they were going to go put all the kids into a gigantic hole and kill them and then cover the hole up. And then here come Affleck and Bernthal. They take everybody out, save the kids. And then, the woman ends up traveling to the country where the bad guy was at. And then she kills him in the end of the movie. And then the son, her son, Alberto, who's also autistic, ends up going to the science center, at the end of the movie. And there's that. Here's the thing. Remember how earlier there was that whole scene about wanting a corgi? Well, that comes up in a conversation halfway through the movie between Affleck and Bernthal. And Affleck just goes, "You're a cat person." And he lists all the right reasons as to why John Bernthal would be a cat person. And then at the end of the movie, they're driving away in the school bus full of kids, and Bernthal's like, "Stop the van, stop it." And he runs out there, and he picks up a cat and brings a cat in. He just finds a cat on the side of the road, and he's all like, "Look at her, look at her, look at her." And it's an orange tabby, which is a male, And then at the end of the movie, they're taking Alberto cross country to the neuroscience center to have him stay there. And then there's this whole bit about how Bernthal's upset that the kid has got the cat. He's like, "Well, I want to hold my cat," And it's like, it goes into this familial aspect of it, right? That's what they're going for, is this idea of like family and this idea of that, right? Of like either your chosen family or your biological family, like all those sorts of things. And I totally get that. Sorry, there's one thing at the beginning of the movie I totally effing left out on. When we find, and I'm going back here, but if you've been wondering why I wasn't going to talk about it, now I'm going to talk about it. The dating scene. So that's where we find Christian Wolff, 9 years after the events of the first movie. He is still single. He's going to a speed dating event in Idaho, and he is the most attractive man there, and all the women are lined up to meet him. And then you find out that he gamed their algorithm in order to make himself the most desirable man there, so he could have the most opportunities to try to find quote unquote love, and he fails across the board. And maybe that has a lot to do with the fact that he's being very selfish about that and not letting it, kind of come natural. And maybe that's also what it is with him and his brother. Because at the end of the movie, he's like, "Hey, why don't we go camping for a couple weeks? I got a reservation at this one park." And then he's like, "Yeah, you want to go together?" Like, yeah, like, "Oh yeah, let's go together." It's nice. It's family stuff. I can't say it's bad, but it's like, when you start looking at, again, the same problem I had with the first movie. There's really good moments in the first movie. There's really good acting. There's really good characterizations. I really enjoy it. But when you start thinking about the plot and maybe some character motivations, it's like you can understand it, but there are things that are missing. So I don't know. Right? So if I had to say this, I prefer the first one over the second one, because the first one felt more original. This one felt a bit more derivative. But that's not to say that I didn't like it. I did like it quite a bit. I just have my complaints with it, because it's like, as a writer, as a storyteller, and as a person, with OCD, and, maybe I have a thing about like, I like things to be explained. I like there to be exposition dumps and lore dumps and things like that to get a better understanding of the world. And I understand that with these movies, you're not always able to do that, and you shouldn't always have to do that. Like little things peppered in here and there for the audience to pick up on. This movie does that a little bit, and it does that through leaps and leaps and leaps and leaps. Like, it's really expecting you to either not care or to just like really give it that wide berth. But either way, both movies are fun. I recommend both movies. I like both movies, and I say bring on the third one. I don't know if that's going to happen. The $80 million budget, the $102 million take home. The movie came out back in April, end of April. It's now been 2 months since the movie came out, and it's already on Amazon. And so it's all going to be whether or not Amazon wants to work with Ben Affleck, because Ben Affleck was a producer on the film. Artist Equity was one of the production companies aside from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, which is owned by Amazon. So if they found it to be worthwhile enough to put in another $80 to $100 million on a third film, then we'll get it. Will it go to theaters? I don't know. But I mean, look, they did the same thing with Roadhouse, right? Roadhouse came out, Doug Liman directed, Jake Gyllenhaal, Roadhouse. I think it was a $60 million or an $80 million movie or something like that. Didn't go to theaters. And now Guy Ritchie's directing Roadhouse 2 with Jake Gyllenhaal and Dave Bautista, or maybe just Dave Bautista. I'm not too sure. Amazon is going to make a lot of movies, so I fully expect us to get a third film. That's the point I'm trying to make. But anyway, I liked it. Okay, I did. I liked it. I want you to let me know your thoughts about this. Let me know your opinions about this. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow for another review. Have yourself a great day, everybody. Thank you again for listening. My name is Matt Jarbo. This has been Patio Commentary. Peace out.